Ethan Cross ripped the radio from a frozen engineer's hand so hard the man stumbled backward into the snow. 60 meters ahead, a $43 million AI supercar was sliding sideways toward a concrete barrier with the CEO of Aurora Motors trapped inside, screaming. Every engineer on that ice track froze. Every algorithm failed. Every system designed to prevent exactly this moment did absolutely nothing. And the only man willing to act was someone nobody in that facility even knew by name. He keyed the radio. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Driver, do you want to live? Then stop helping." But here is the part no one expected. This forgotten mechanic, this invisible contractor who checked tire pressure for a living, he did not learn to save lives on a frozen track by accident. He learned it by failing to save the one life that mattered most. Drop a comment with the city you are watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. The radio hit the table so hard it cracked the plastic casing. Ethan Cross did not care. He had already turned away from the engineer he had just shoved aside, and his eyes were locked on the track, on the black shape fishtailing across white ice, growing larger and louder with every second. He knew that sound. He had heard it before, 8 years ago, on a frozen lake in Iceland. And the man who had been inside that car never came home. But Ethan did not think about Iceland, not now. He pressed the radio button and spoke. "Driver, throttle off, right now. Do not touch the brake." Static. Then a voice came back. Female, shaking, furious. "Who is this? Who the hell is on this channel?" "Ma'am, my name does not matter. What matters is you have about 4 seconds before that car hits the wall. Throttle off, now."
"The system is not responding. Override is locked. I cannot—"
"I did not ask what the system is doing. I asked you to take your foot off the throttle." Silence. 1 second. 2. Then the engine pitch dropped. Ethan exhaled. Just barely. He was not relieved. He was counting. 60 meters. Maybe 55 now. The car was still sliding at 68 kilometers per hour, across black ice that had been polished smooth by 12 hours of testing runs. The AI stability system had locked all 4 wheels, which was the worst possible response on a surface like this. Locked wheels do not steer. They just slide. Ethan knew this the way a surgeon knows anatomy. Not from textbooks, from hands that had done the work 1,000 times. "Now listen to me carefully," he said. "Center the steering wheel. Do not turn it. Do not correct. Just center it." "Are you insane? The wall is right there." "I know exactly where the wall is. Center the wheel. Let the car settle." He waited. The car's trajectory shifted. Just slightly. 2 degrees. Maybe 3. Enough. The AI system, no longer fighting the driver's panicked input, began to release the wheel lock in micropulses. Not because it was smart, because the conflicting data had stopped. "Good," Ethan said. "Now, look where you want the car to go. Not at the wall. Not at the barrier. Pick a point past it. To the left. The open runoff area." "I can see it." "Then look at it. Only at it. Your hands will follow your eyes. That is how it works." 3 seconds passed. The car began to arc. Slowly. Painfully slowly. Like watching a ship try to turn in a harbor. "Now squeeze the brake. Gently. Like you were pressing your thumb into clay. Do not stop. Squeeze." The car slowed. The tires, given just enough rotational freedom by the AI's confused recalculation, found grip. Not much. Microscopic texture in the ice. But enough. The black shape slid past the concrete barrier so close that the side mirror exploded against the edge of it, sending shards of glass and carbon fiber into the frozen air. Then the car stopped. Dead silence on the radio. Ethan set the handset down on the table. His hands were steady. His face showed nothing. Around him, 14 engineers stood with their mouths open. Not one of them had spoken during the entire event. Not one of them had even reached for a radio. The woman who climbed out of that car was Margaret Hale, 52 years old, CEO of Aurora Motors. A woman who had built her entire career on one core belief: that artificial intelligence would one day eliminate human error from driving entirely. She had staked everything on it: her reputation, her company, her legacy. $2 billion in development, 6 years of her life. And 40 seconds ago, she had almost died because of it. She stood on the ice next to the car, one hand braced against the crumpled fender, the other pressed flat against her chest. Her breathing was ragged. Her face was white. An engineer named Dylan ran toward her. He was the project lead, 29 years old, brilliant with code, useless in a crisis. "Margaret, are you okay? We are running diagnostics right now. The stability protocol experienced a cascading failure in the traction module. The neural net misidentified the friction coefficient by—" "Shut up." Dylan stopped. Margaret's eyes were scanning the edge of the track, looking for someone. "Who was on the radio?" Dylan blinked. "What? Who was talking to me? Who told me what to do?" Dylan looked at the other engineers. They looked at each other. Nobody answered. Margaret pushed off the fender and walked straight across the ice toward the service area where the support crew worked. Tire storage, equipment sheds, tool benches. She found him next to a battered Ford F-150 with rust on the wheel wells and a child's booster seat in the back. He was packing a lunchbox. "Was that you?" she said. Ethan looked up. He had gray at his temples, deep lines around his eyes. His hands were calloused and dry from cold. He wore a canvas work coat with no logo and steel-toed boots that had seen years of use. "Ma'am?" "On the radio. Was that you?" "Yes." Margaret stared at him for a long moment. She was still breathing hard. She could still feel the adrenaline in her veins like electricity. "Who are you?" "Ethan Cross, Winter Tire Service. I started 3 weeks ago." "You are a tire technician?" "Seasonal contractor, yes." Margaret took one step closer. "A tire technician just saved my life." "You saved your own life, ma'am. You listened. Most people do not." She shook her head slowly. She had run a $4 billion company for 6 years. She had testified before congressional committees on autonomous vehicle safety. She had debated the heads of Mercedes, Tesla, and Waymo on live television. And the smartest thing she had heard in years had just come from a man in a $20 coat, standing next to a pickup truck with a booster seat. "How did you know what to do?" she asked. Ethan zipped the lunchbox closed. "I have to pick up my daughter." "I am asking you a question." "And I am telling you my priority. She gets out of swim practice at 3:30. I cannot be late." Margaret looked at her watch. It was 2:47. "Mr. Cross." "Ma'am, I appreciate that you are shaken up. Anyone would be. But the answer to your question is not complicated. Your AI locked the wheels on ice. That is the wrong response. Any driver with winter experience knows that. You had 60 meters and 68 clicks of momentum. The system was fighting you, and you were fighting it. And neither one of you was going to win. So I told you to stop fighting. That is all. That is all. That is all." Margaret was quiet. Then she said, "Where did you learn that?" Ethan paused. Something moved behind his eyes. Something old. Something heavy. "A long time ago," he said. "In a different life." He picked up the lunchbox and opened the truck door. Margaret watched him. "I want to talk to you again," she said. "You know where the tire shed is." He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and drove away across the snow without looking back. Margaret did not go back to the control room. She walked to her private office in the main building, closed the door, sat down behind her desk, and stared at the wall for 11 minutes. She did not check email. She did not take the 7 calls that came in from the engineering team. She did not respond to Dylan's increasingly frantic messages about the diagnostic report. She was thinking about something Ethan had said.
You were fighting it, and it was fighting you, and neither one of you was going to win.
She had spent 6 years building a system designed to replace human judgment, and the first time that system was truly tested under pressure, it had nearly killed her. Not because the hardware failed, not because the software crashed, but because the system could not do the one thing that had actually saved her life. It could not surrender. The AI had calculated, it had modeled, it had run 17,000 micro-adjustments in under 3 seconds, and every single one of those adjustments had been based on data. But the data was wrong. The friction coefficient on that section of ice had changed. Temperature fluctuation, wind, microfractures in the surface that no sensor could detect. The AI kept applying corrections based on conditions that no longer existed.
And the more Margaret had tried to override it,
The more the system had resisted, because it was programmed to assume it knew better. 17,000 calculations. 3 human sentences. She picked up her phone and called her chief of staff. "Find out everything you can about a contractor named Ethan Cross." Dylan found the file first. He brought it to Margaret the next morning, visibly unsettled. "You should see this," he said. The file was thin, 3 pages, a standard contractor background check. But clipped to the back was a printout Dylan had found buried in an industry archive. "Ethan Cross," Dylan read aloud. "Former Dynamics Commander for the Nordic Winter Performance Institute. 12 years. Wrote the original ISO guidelines for sub-zero vehicle behavior. Trained military and civilian test drivers across 9 countries. Credited with developing the counter-steer stabilization method that is still standard protocol in professional ice racing." Margaret looked at him. "He checked tire pressure for us," Dylan said. "I know. He is one of the most experienced winter dynamics experts alive, and he was changing tires." "I know." Dylan flipped to the last page. His voice got quieter. "There was an incident, 8 years ago. A testing session in Vatnajökull, Iceland. A driver named Carl Engstrom. He was Ethan's partner. They were evaluating a prototype stability system for a Swedish defense contractor." Margaret waited. "Ethan flagged the ice conditions as unstable. He filed a formal objection. He told them not to run the test. They overruled him. The session director said the data supported safe parameters." Dylan stopped. "Carl went out on the ice. The car lost traction at 143 kilometers per hour. The system locked the wheels." Margaret felt her stomach drop. "Same failure," she whispered. "Same failure. Exactly the same."
the AI locked the wheels on deteriorating ice, and the driver had no way to override.
What happened to Carl? He hit a rock outcrop at the edge of the lake. Died on impact. He was 39. He had 2 kids. Margaret closed her eyes. Ethan filed an investigation. He testified before the Nordic Transport Safety Board. He was right about everything. Every warning he had given was documented. Every objection was on record. but the contractor buried it. Sealed settlement. Non-disclosure. The session director was reassigned. Nobody was held accountable. And Ethan? He walked away, left the institute, left the industry entirely, disappeared from every professional database. No publications after 2018, no conference appearances, no consulting work. Nothing. Margaret stared at the file. Then his wife got sick, Dylan said quietly. Ovarian cancer. She passed 2 years after Iceland. He had a daughter. She was 4 at the time. Margaret pressed her hand flat on the desk. She did not speak for a long time. He gave up everything, she finally said. He gave up the career, yes. No, he gave up being right. He was right, and nobody listened, and his best friend died because of it. And instead of fighting, instead of suing, instead of going public, he just walked away. Why would someone do that? Margaret looked at Dylan. Because he had something more important to protect. That afternoon, Margaret went to the tire shed. Ethan was organizing winter studs on a metal rack. His movements were precise, methodical, unhurried. He worked the way a man works when he has made peace with exactly who he is and where he stands. I read your file, Margaret said. Ethan did not stop working. Which one? The real one. Iceland. Carl Engstrom. The safety board testimony. His hands paused for just a moment. Then he continued sorting. That was a long time ago. You wrote the ice stability protocols that half the industry still uses. I did a lot of things. And now you are sorting tire studs. Ethan set down a stud and turned to look at her. His face was calm. No anger, no bitterness, no defensiveness. Just a steady, quiet clarity that Margaret had seen in very few people in her life. Ms. Hale, I am going to tell you something that might not make sense to you right now, but I hope someday it will. She waited. I did not walk away because I was broken. I walked away because I understood something that most people in this industry never learn. What is that? Being right does not mean anything if you are not there for the people who need you. Margaret frowned. That sounds like a greeting card. It sounds like a greeting card because you have not buried your wife and explained to a 4-year-old why mommy is not coming home. When you have done that, you stop caring about protocols and publications and who gets credit for what. You start caring about 3:30 p.m. You start caring about whether your daughter's goggles fit right, and whether she smiled at practice, and whether she knows, every single day, that she is not alone. Margaret said nothing. Carl died because people cared about data more than judgment. My wife died because the world does not care what you deserve. I cannot control either of those things. But I can control whether my daughter grows up knowing her father was there, every day, every swim practice, every bedtime. That is not a small thing, Ms. Hale. That is the biggest thing. Margaret felt something shift inside her chest. Something she had been carrying for years without knowing it. A weight she had never named. She had no children. She had chosen her career over everything. She had told herself that was strength, that sacrifice was power. And now she was standing in a tire shed, looking at a man who had given up everything the world valued, and finding herself unable to argue that he was wrong. I want to offer you a position, she said. I know. Director of Safety, full authority over human override systems. You would report directly to me. You would have final say on any protocol that involves driver and AI interaction. That is a generous offer. It is not generous. It is necessary. Yesterday, I almost died because my company built a machine that could not admit it was wrong. You were the only person I have met who understands why that matters. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "I will consult," he said. "Consult. Part-time, remote when possible. I will review your systems. I will rewrite your protocols. I will train your engineers to understand that data is not the same as wisdom. But I have conditions." "Name them." "I leave at 3 p.m. every day. No exceptions. No calls after 5. No travel during the school year unless I can bring my daughter.
And the first time anyone in your company overrides a human safety objection the way they did in Iceland, I walk, and I go public." Margaret blinked. "You are setting the terms for the future of automotive safety around a child's swim practice schedule?" "Yes." "That is insane." "No, that is the whole point." Ethan picked up his coat. "My daughter's name is Lily. She is 8. She swims the 50-meter freestyle, and she is getting faster every week. 2 months ago, she asked me why I always come to practice, and I told her it is because there is no place in the world I would rather be." "And that was not a nice thing to say, Miss Hale." "That was the truest thing I have ever said in my life." He pulled on his gloves. "You build machines that calculate. That is fine. Calculation is useful. But the thing that saved your life yesterday was not calculation. It was judgment. And judgment does not come from data. It comes from loss. It comes from failure. It comes from standing in a hospital room, holding your wife's hand, and knowing there is nothing you can do, and choosing to keep going anyway." He opened the shed door. "Your AI could not save you, because it did not know how to stop trying to be right. I could save you, because I learned, a long time ago, that being right is not the most important thing." He stepped out into the cold. 3:30, Miss Hale. Every day. That is the most important thing." Margaret stood alone in the tire shed for a long time after he left. She thought about the barrier, about the sound of the side mirror shattering, about the way her hands had shaken on the steering wheel. She thought about Carl Engstrom, 39 years old, 2 kids, dead on a frozen lake because someone looked at a spreadsheet and decided the data was more important than the man standing in front of them, saying the ice was not safe. She thought about Ethan, sorting tire studs, packing lunchboxes, driving a rusted pickup truck with a booster seat to swim practice every afternoon at exactly 3:30. And she thought about herself, 52 years old, CEO of a company worth $4 billion, a woman who had everything the world said mattered and who, 40 seconds from death, had been saved by a man who had nothing the world said mattered, except wisdom, except presence, except the unshakable knowledge of what actually counts. Margaret picked up her phone. She called her chief of staff. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," she said. "All of them." "All of them? Margaret, you have the board review at 4 and the—" "All of them." She hung up. She sat down on a cold metal bench in a tire shed at the edge of a frozen proving ground. And for the first time in 6 years, Margaret Hale had absolutely nothing scheduled. And for the first time in 6 years, she did not feel like she was falling behind. She felt like she was finally catching up. Margaret did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark of her hotel suite, staring at the ceiling, replaying the same 40 seconds over and over. The slide, the scream, the locked wheels, the wall rushing toward her. And then that voice, calm, steady, almost impossibly gentle for a moment that violent. "Driver, do you want to live? Then stop helping." She had spent 26 years in the automotive industry. She had a PhD from MIT. She had been on the cover of Forbes twice. She had shaken hands with 3 sitting presidents. And the sentence that saved her life had come from a man who earned $19 an hour
checking tire pressure. At 4 in the morning, she gave up on sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, picked up her phone, and called the one person she trusted enough to be honest with her. Her older brother, Frank. He picked up on the second ring. He always did. Frank was 61, retired, living on a small ranch in Montana. He had been a Marine, then a high school football coach, then nothing in particular, which suited him fine. "Maggie, it is 4 in the morning." "I know." "Are you okay?" "No." Frank was quiet for a moment. He knew his sister. He knew the difference between her business voice and her real voice. This was her real voice. "Tell me," he said. So she told him. Everything. The test, the ice, the failure, the wall, the voice on the radio, the man in the tire shed, the file, Iceland, Carl Engstrom, the dead wife, the 8-year-old daughter, the swim practice at 3:30. When she finished, Frank was quiet for a long time. "You are shaken up," he said. "I almost died, Frank." "I know, but that is not why you were calling me at 4 in the morning." Margaret closed her eyes. Her brother had always been able to see through her, even when they were kids, even when she had built walls so high that nobody else could get close. "He turned me down," she said. "You offered him a job?" "Director of safety, full authority, direct report to me. And he said he would consult, part-time, as long as it did not interfere with his daughter's swim practice." Frank laughed. Not a mocking laugh, a warm one. "I like this guy already." "Frank, I am serious. I am offering him the opportunity to reshape an entire industry, and he is worried about a swim meet." "Maggie, listen to me. You almost died yesterday. A man saved your life with 3 sentences, and you are frustrated because he will not rearrange his priorities to match yours? Do you hear yourself?" Margaret opened her mouth. Then she closed it. "This is not about the job," Frank said. "This is about the fact that a man looked at everything you have to offer and decided his daughter mattered more. And you do not know what to do with that." "That is not fair." "It is completely fair. You gave up everything for your career, Maggie. Everything. You gave up marriage. You gave up kids. You gave up holidays and birthdays and Sunday dinners. And you told yourself that was strength. That sacrifice was what greatness required. And now you are sitting in a hotel room at 4 in the morning because a man in a $20 coat showed you that maybe you were wrong." Margaret felt her throat tighten. "I was not wrong," she said quietly. "Then why are you crying?" She had not realized she was. She touched her face. Her fingers came away wet. "Go to bed, Maggie," Frank said. "And when you wake up, do not try to make this man into something he does not want to be. Listen to what he is telling you, not about cars, about life." He hung up. Margaret sat in the dark for another hour. Then she got dressed and drove to the facility. It was 5:30 in the morning when she arrived. The proving grounds were empty. The track was a flat white scar under the pre-dawn sky. The concrete barrier still had black marks where her car had scraped past it. She walked to the tire shed. The door was unlocked. She went inside and sat on the same cold metal bench where she had sat the day before. She did not turn on the lights. She just sat there in the dark, breathing, thinking, waiting for something she could not name. At 6:15, she heard a truck pull up outside. The shed door opened. Ethan walked in carrying the thermos and a small tool bag. He flipped the light switch, saw Margaret sitting on the bench, and stopped. "Miss Hale." "Mr. Cross." He looked at her for a moment. Then he set down his things and walked to the workbench. "You have been here a while," he said. How do you know? The bench is cold, and you are not shivering, which means you have been sitting long enough for your body to adjust. Margaret almost smiled. You notice things. That is what I do. He opened his thermos and poured coffee into the cap. He did not offer her any. Not out of rudeness.
He simply had one cup and one thermos and one routine, and it did not include unexpected guests.
I spoke to my brother last night, Margaret said. Ethan sipped his coffee. He did not ask who her brother was or what she had said. He just waited. He told me I was not upset about the crash. He told me I was upset because you turned down my offer. I did not turn it down. I said I would consult. You know what I mean. Ethan set his cup down and turned to face her. Ms. Hale, what exactly do you want from me? I want to understand something. Okay. You walked away from a career that most people in this industry would kill for. You had credentials that could have put you on any executive team in the world. And you chose to check tire pressure in a shed. Yes. Why? Ethan leaned against the workbench and crossed his arms. He was quiet for a moment, not because he did not know the answer, because he was deciding how much to share.
You want the easy answer or the real one?
The real one. The easy answer is that I needed flexible hours and short-term contracts so I could take care of my daughter. And that is true. But the real answer is harder. He paused. After Carl died, I spent a year trying to get justice. I filed reports. I testified. I gave depositions. I did everything the system told me to do. And in the end, the company that killed my best friend paid a settlement, signed an NDA, and went back to business. The session director who overruled my safety objection got transferred to a different division. He got a raise 6 months later. I checked. Margaret said nothing. I thought about going public. I had the documentation. I had the evidence. I could have destroyed that company. And for about 3 months, that was all I thought about. Revenge, accountability, making sure the world knew what happened to Carl. What stopped you? My wife. Ethan's voice changed when he said the word.
Not louder, not softer, just different. Like a string on a guitar tuned to a frequency that only he could hear.
Sarah sat me down one night. Lily was 2 years old. She was asleep in the next room, and Sarah looked at me and said something I will never forget. He stopped for a moment. Margaret could see him pulling the memory from a place he did not often visit. She said, Ethan, you can spend the next 5 years being right, or you can spend the next 5 years being here, but you cannot do both. And Lily needs you here. Margaret felt her chest tighten again. I argued with her, Ethan said. I told her Carl deserved justice. She said Carl was dead and justice would not bring him back. I told her someone had to be held accountable. She said someone already was. Me. I was accountable to Lily, to her, to this family. He picked up his coffee again. Sarah was not a diplomat. She was not gentle about it. She told me straight.
She said, You are becoming a person I do not recognize. You are angry all the time. You are gone all the time. And your daughter is growing up without you, while you chase a fight that will not change anything. And she was right. So you stopped. I stopped. I dropped the case. I let the NDA stand. I came home. I started taking contract jobs, short-term work, cold weather facilities mostly, because that was what I knew. I would work 6 weeks, 8 weeks, come home, be with my family. He drank. Then Sarah got sick. Margaret held her breath. Ovarian cancer. Stage 3 by the time they found it. They gave her 18 months. She made it 22. She was stubborn like that. He said it with a faint smile, the kind of smile that holds more grief than tears ever could. The last thing Sarah ever said to me was not about love. It was not about missing me. It was not sentimental at all. She grabbed my hand, and she looked at me with those eyes, and she said, "Do not be late for pickup." Margaret put her hand over her mouth. I laughed, Ethan said. I was standing in a hospital room, watching my wife die, and I laughed, because that was Sarah, practical to the end. She did not need me to fall apart. She needed me to keep going. She needed to know that Lily would never stand at the school gate, wondering where her dad was. He set the coffee down. So that is what I did. For 4 years, every single day, I have been there at 3:30. Rain, snow, flu, flat tire, does not matter. 3:30. Lily comes out of that building, and I am there. Every time, without exception. Margaret wiped her eyes. She did not care anymore about maintaining composure. She did not care about being the CEO. She was just a woman in a cold shed, listening to a man tell the truth about what matters. "Do you know what Lily said to me last month?" Ethan asked. Margaret shook her head. She said, "Dad, some of the other kids get picked up by babysitters." I said, "I know." She said, "Why do you always come yourself?" And I said, "Because there is no place I would rather be." And she looked at me like I had just given her the whole world. He paused. "That look, Ms. Hale, that look on my daughter's face, that is worth more than every credential, every protocol, every title, every salary on earth. I cannot explain it to someone who has not felt it, but that look is the reason I wake up in the morning." Margaret stood up from the bench. Her legs were stiff from the cold and the sitting, but she did not care. She walked over to the workbench and stood in front of Ethan. "I owe you more than an apology," she said. "I owe you an honest conversation." "About what?" "About what happened yesterday. Not the crash. What happened after." Ethan waited. "When I offered you that job, I was not thinking about you. I was thinking about me. I was thinking about how to fix my problem, how to make my company safer, how to protect my reputation. I was doing what I always do. I was trying to control the outcome. That is what CEOs do." "Yes, and yesterday, that almost killed me." She took a breath. "You told me the AI could not save me because it did not know how to stop trying to be right. You were not just talking about the car, were you?" Ethan held her gaze. "No. You were talking about me. I was talking about everyone, the system, the engineers, the company, you. The whole culture that says the answer to every problem is more data, more control, more certainty. But some problems do not have certain answers. Some situations require you to let go, to trust something that is not in the data. Call it instinct, call it experience, call it wisdom. Whatever it is, your machine does not have it, and your engineers have been trained to ignore it." Margaret nodded slowly. "Carl died because a session director looked at a computer screen and decided it knew more than the man standing on the ice," Ethan said. "I almost watched you die for exactly the same reason. 8 years apart. Same failure, same arrogance, same belief that enough data makes you invincible. And you think I can change that? I think you are the only person who can. You were the one who almost died. That changes a person. It should, anyway." Margaret looked at the floor. Then she looked back up. "I will meet your conditions," she said. "All of them. Part-time, remote, 3 p.m. departure. No calls after 5. Travel only with Lily. And the override clause?
If anyone in my company overrides a human safety objection without documentation and review, you walk and go public. I will put it in writing. Then I will consult. Margaret extended her hand. Ethan shook it. His grip was firm, but not competitive. The handshake of a man who did not need to prove anything.
"Can I ask you one more thing?" Margaret said. "Go ahead."
Yesterday, when you grabbed that radio, when you heard me screaming, what did you feel? Ethan was quiet for a long time. I felt Carl, he said. I heard you, and I heard Carl. 8 years ago on that lake, I was 300 meters away. I had a radio. I called out the same instructions. Center the wheel. Release the brake. Look where you want to go. His voice dropped. But Carl could not hear me. The radio frequency had been changed for the test session, and nobody told me. I was screaming into dead air. I watched him slide across that lake for 11 seconds, and I could not reach him. Margaret felt the air leave her lungs. Yesterday, when I heard you on the radio, I did not think. I did not plan. I did not calculate. I just grabbed the handset and did what I could not do for Carl. I gave the instructions, and this time, someone heard me. He blinked, once, hard. That is why I am still standing here, Miss Hale. Not because of your job offer, not because of your company, because yesterday, for the first time in 8 years, the radio worked. Margaret could not speak. She stood there, in a tire shed, at 6:30 in the morning, looking at a man who had carried a dead friend's ghost for 8 years, and who had just, in one frozen moment, found something he did not even know he was looking for. Not redemption, not justice, just the chance to finish the sentence he had started 8 years ago on a frozen lake in Iceland, when the radio went silent and the car hit the rocks, and the world took something from him that no protocol, no AI, no algorithm could ever give back. He had finally gotten to say the words, and this time, they worked. Margaret stepped back. I will have the contract drawn up today, she said. Send it to my email. I will review it tonight after Lily goes to bed. After she goes to bed. After she goes to bed. Margaret turned toward the door. Then she stopped. Mr. Cross? Yes? Thank you. Not for yesterday. For today. For telling me the truth. Ethan nodded. Truth is the only thing I have left that is worth giving, Ms. Hale. Everything else got taken. She walked out of the shed into the cold morning. Behind her, Ethan Cross picked up his tool bag, opened it, and began sorting tire studs, one by one, with the same quiet precision he brought to everything. At 2:45, he packed up. At 2:50, he started the truck. At 3:15, he pulled into the parking lot of Lily's school. At 3:28, he turned off the engine and stepped out into the cold. At 3:30, the doors opened. Lily came running out with her swim bag bouncing against her hip and her hair still damp from practice. She saw him and her face split into that smile. That one. The one that was worth more than every job, every title, every legacy. Dad! Hey, kid, how was practice? I beat my time. Coach said I was faster by almost a whole second. Almost a whole second? That is serious. Can we get hot chocolate? We can always get hot chocolate. She climbed into the truck and buckled her seatbelt and started talking about her day, and Ethan listened to every word. Not because he had to, because there was no sound in the world he valued more. He pulled out of the parking lot at 3:34, right on time, the way it always was, the way it always would be. Because Ethan Cross had learned something a long time ago that most people spend their entire lives trying to understand. He learned it in the worst possible way, in the hardest possible circumstances, at the highest possible cost. The thing that matters most is never the thing the world tells you to chase. It is the thing waiting for you at 3:30, with damp hair and a smile, asking for hot chocolate.
And if you are smart enough, brave enough, broken enough to understand that, then you have already won the only race that counts. The contract arrived in Ethan's inbox at 9:14 that night. He did not open it until 9:47, after Lily had brushed her teeth, after he had read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through together, after she had asked him 3 questions about whether penguins could dream, after he had tucked the blanket around her shoulders and kissed her forehead and stood in the doorway for a moment watching her breathe. Then he went to the kitchen table, opened his laptop, and read every word. Margaret had honored every condition. Part-time, remote capability, 3 p.m. departure, no calls after 5, travel with Lily or no travel at all. And at the bottom, in bold legal language that her attorneys must have fought against, the override clause. If any Aurora employee overrode a human safety objection without proper documentation and multi-level review, Ethan Cross had the contractual right to terminate his engagement, waive his NDA, and disclose any findings publicly. He signed it at 10:12 and sent it back. Then he closed the laptop and sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time, looking at nothing, thinking about Carl. He started the following Monday. Dylan met him at the main entrance of the Aurora Engineering Building. The young engineer looked uncomfortable. He was holding a visitor badge and a folder of orientation documents, and wearing the expression of a man who had been told to welcome someone he did not want there. "Mr. Cross, welcome. I have your credentials and access documents here. We have you set up in a shared workspace on the 2nd floor near the—" "I do not need an office," Ethan said. Dylan blinked. "Excuse me? I need access to your telemetry data from every test run in the last 18 months. I need the source code for the stability override protocol. I need the sensor calibration logs. And I need a table and a chair somewhere quiet. We have a conference room on—" "The tire shed has a table." Dylan stared at him. "You want to work in the tire shed?" "I want to work where nobody will interrupt me. Your engineers are going to resist everything I recommend. That will be easier for them if I am sitting in their workspace reminding them that an outsider is reviewing their work. If I am in the tire shed, they can pretend I do not exist until I hand them something they cannot ignore." Dylan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the orientation folder in his hands like it had become irrelevant, which it had. "I will have the data sent to your access portal by noon," he said. "Thank you." Ethan walked to the tire shed. He spent the first 3 days reading. He did not talk to anyone. He did not attend meetings. He did not respond to the 4 emails Dylan sent him asking for status updates. He sat at the metal table in the tire shed with his laptop and a thermos of coffee, and he read 17 months of telemetry data, line by line, number by number, until he understood exactly what Aurora's AI system could do, what it could not do, and where the gap between those 2 things was wide enough to kill someone. On the 4th day, he sent Margaret a single email. "We need to talk. Bring Dylan." They met in the tire shed at 8 in the morning. Margaret arrived first. Dylan arrived 2 minutes later, carrying his own laptop and looking defensive before a word had been spoken. Ethan did not waste time. "Your system has a fundamental design flaw," he said. "It is not a software bug. It is not a hardware limitation. It is a philosophy problem." Dylan straightened. "A philosophy problem?" Your AI is designed to be right. Every algorithm, every protocol, every decision tree is built on the assumption that the system's calculation is more accurate than human input. When conflicting data arrives, the system does not ask for help. It overrides. It assumes the human is wrong. Because statistically, the human usually is wrong, Dylan said. That is the entire basis of autonomous vehicle safety. Human error accounts for 94% of. I know the statistic. I also know that the 6% of cases where the human is right are the ones where people die. Dylan went quiet. Your system processed 17,000 calculations in the 3 seconds before Ms. Hale's car hit that barrier. Every single one of those calculations was based on a friction model that had been calibrated 6 hours earlier. But the ice surface had changed. Temperature dropped 4 degrees. Wind shifted. Microfractures formed in the top layer. Your sensors detected the change, but the system weighted historical calibration data higher than real-time anomalies. It decided its old model was more reliable than what it was seeing in the moment. Margaret looked at Dylan. Is that true? Dylan hesitated. The weighting protocol prioritizes calibrated baselines because real-time sensor data can be noisy. If we let the system react to every anomaly, we get false corrections that Carl Engstrom is dead because of that weighting protocol, Ethan said. The room went silent. Not your specific protocol, Ethan continued, but the same logic, the same assumption. The system in Iceland weighted historical data over real-time conditions. The ice was deteriorating. The sensors saw it. The algorithm decided the sensors were wrong. Carl's car locked up at 143 kilometers per hour, and he died on a rock outcrop because a computer decided it knew better than the ice. Dylan's face had gone pale. That is a different system, a different company, it is the same mistake. And I watched your system make it again 4 days ago with your CEO in the driver's seat. Margaret held up her hand. Enough, Dylan. What is the fix? Ethan opened his laptop and turned it toward them. 3 changes. First, the override hierarchy has to be inverted. Right now, the AI has final authority, and the human has to request permission to override. That has to flip. The human has default authority. The AI can advise, warn, even resist briefly. But when a human driver says, "I am taking control," the system lets go. Immediately. No delay. No confirmation sequence. No graduated handoff. Immediate release. That undermines the entire safety architecture, Dylan said. The entire safety architecture almost killed your CEO. Dylan looked at Margaret. She did not look back. Second, Ethan said, the system needs an uncertainty threshold. Right now, your AI never says, "I do not know." It always produces an answer, even when the data is contradictory or incomplete. I want a protocol that triggers when sensor data conflicts with the calibrated model beyond a certain margin. When that happens, the system does not override the human. It says, "I am uncertain, human input requested," and it steps back. You want the AI to admit it is confused, Margaret said. I want the AI to be honest. Confusion is not weakness. Pretending to be certain when you are not is weakness. That is what killed Carl. That is what almost killed you. Margaret nodded slowly. And the third? The third is the hardest. I want a new rule written into every protocol, every training document, every engineer's workflow. One sentence. Authority must be able to surrender. Dylan frowned. What does that even mean? It means that any system, any machine, any algorithm that cannot voluntarily give up control is not safe. It is a prison. Your AI does not know how to stop being in charge. It was not designed to step aside. It fights the human for authority because it was built to believe it should always have authority. And that belief, that one assumption, is what makes it lethal. Dylan looked like he wanted to argue. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. Because he was smart enough, despite his defensiveness, to recognize truth when it was delivered this clearly. "You are not asking us to make the AI weaker," Dylan said slowly. "No, I am asking you to make it wiser. There is a difference." Margaret leaned forward. "How long to implement?" "If Dylan cooperates, 6 weeks for the override inversion and the uncertainty threshold. The cultural change, the surrender principle, that takes longer. That is not a software update. That is retraining every engineer in this building to accept that their creation has limits." "They will push back," Dylan said. "Of course they will. They built this system. They believe in it." Telling an engineer that their system has a fatal flaw is like telling a parent their child has a problem. The instinct is to defend, not to listen. "So how do we get them to listen?" Ethan looked at Dylan. "I'm going to show them what happens when the system fails and nobody is there to catch it." Dylan swallowed. "How?" "I'm going to put them in the car." The first simulation session happened the following week. Ethan had Dylan set up the test track with an identical ice surface to the one that had nearly killed Margaret. Same temperature, same wind conditions, same microfracture patterns in the surface layer. He had them calibrate the AI system 6 hours before the run, exactly as they had done before the incident. Then he asked for volunteers. No one volunteered. Ethan looked at the 12 engineers standing at the edge of the track. They were brilliant, every one of them. Advanced degrees, competitive salaries, stock options. The best minds in autonomous vehicle development. And not one of them wanted to get in the car. "You built this system," Ethan said. "You told the world it was safe. You put a CEO in that driver's seat and told her the AI would protect her. And now I am asking you to trust it with your own lives. And nobody wants to go first." Silence. A young woman near the back raised her hand. She was maybe 27, short hair, nervous eyes. Her name was Chen, and she had been on the sensor calibration team. "I will go," she said. The other engineers looked at her. Dylan looked uncomfortable. "Chen, you do not have to." "I calibrated those sensors," she said. "If the system is flawed, I want to understand why." Ethan nodded. "Good." He put Chen in the car. He put himself in the passenger seat. He wore no seatbelt and carried only a radio. Chen looked at him. "You are not wearing a seatbelt." "If the system works the way your team says it does, I do not need one. And if it does not, then we will both learn something important." Chen started the car. She accelerated to 60 kilometers per hour across the ice. The AI system hummed along, making micro-adjustments, keeping the car straight and stable. Then Ethan reached over and pressed a button on the dashboard that Dylan had installed at his request. The button triggered a simulated sensor conflict, feeding the AI contradictory friction data, identical to what had occurred during Margaret's run. The car jerked. Chen gasped and grabbed the wheel. The AI immediately began fighting her input. The steering stiffened. The brakes pulsed. The system was trying to correct based on data that no longer reflected reality. "Let go of the wheel," Ethan said calmly. "What?" "You are fighting it. The system is fighting you. Nobody wins this fight. Let go." Chen's knuckles were white. Her breathing was fast. She did not let go. "Chen, look at me." She turned her head. Her eyes were wide with fear. "You calibrated those sensors. You know better than anyone that the data feeding this system right now is wrong. The system does not know that. You do. So who should be making the decisions?" "I should." "Then tell the system to let go." "It will not listen. The override requires a confirmation sequence and a—" "I know. That is the problem.
The system does not let you take control when you need it most. So right now, in this moment, I need you to do exactly what I told Ms. Hale. Throttle off. Center the wheel. Look where you want to go. Chen took her foot off the gas. She centered the wheel. She looked past the barrier to the open runoff area on the left. The car settled. The locked wheels released. The trajectory shifted. They slid past the barrier with 3 feet to spare. Chen sat in the driver's seat, shaking. Her hands were still on the wheel. She was breathing in short, ragged bursts. "Now you understand," Ethan said.
The system tried to kill me. The system tried to be right. That is not the same thing as trying to kill you. But the result is the same. He opened his door and stepped out onto the ice. Tell your colleagues what that felt like. Chen did. She stood in front of the engineering team that afternoon and described every second of the experience. The jerk of the steering, the stiffening of the wheel, the terrifying realization that she was trapped inside a machine that would not listen to her, that would not surrender, that was so certain of its own calculations that it would rather crash than admit it was wrong. By the time she finished, 3 other engineers had volunteered for the next simulation. By the end of the week, every engineer on the team had sat in that car. Every single one of them came out shaken. And every single one of them understood. Dylan was the last to go. He had resisted the longest. He had argued that the simulation was biased, that Ethan was creating conditions designed to make the system fail, that the real-world probability of these exact parameters occurring was statistically negligible. Ethan had listened to every objection without interrupting. Then he had said one thing. "Get in the car, Dylan." Dylan got in the car. When he came out, he did not speak for 20 minutes. He sat on a bench at the edge of the track with his head in his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "I felt it," he said. "I felt it fighting me. I knew the data was wrong, and I knew what to do, and the system would not let me do it." "Now imagine you are not an engineer," Ethan said. "Imagine you are a mother driving her kids to school. Imagine you are a 70-year-old man who has never heard the word algorithm. Imagine you are anyone in the world except the people who built this system. How would they feel?" Dylan's jaw tightened. "They would feel helpless," he said. "They would feel betrayed. They trusted the machine. The machine told them it would keep them safe. And when it mattered most, the machine chose its own certainty over their survival." Dylan stood up. He looked Ethan in the eyes. "I will make the changes." "All 3? "All 3. Override inversion, uncertainty threshold, surrender protocol." "How long?" 4 weeks. Maybe 3 if my team works weekends." "They will work weekends." "How do you know?" "Because they all sat in that car, and none of them will sleep well until the system is fixed." Ethan was right. The team worked through 2 weekends straight. They rewrote the core override architecture. They built the uncertainty threshold. And Dylan, who had started this process as Ethan's loudest critic, became his strongest ally. On the 15th day, Dylan showed up at the tire shed at 6 in the morning. Ethan was already there, drinking coffee. "I owe you an apology," Dylan said. "For what?" "When Margaret told me to pull your file, I thought she was overreacting. I thought you were just a contractor who got lucky with a radio call. I did not take you seriously. Most people do not. I was wrong. You were not wrong to question me. You were wrong to stop there. Questioning is the beginning of understanding. Dismissing is the end of it." Dylan sat down on the bench. He looked tired, but it was a different kind of tired than before. Not the exhaustion of resistance, the exhaustion of honest work. "Can I ask you something personal?" Dylan said.
Depends on the question. When you were in that car with Chen, you were not wearing a seatbelt. You said if the system works, you do not need one. But you knew the system was going to fail. You designed the simulation to make it fail. So why no seatbelt? Ethan took a long sip of his coffee. Because I needed Chen to believe I trusted her.
What? Chen was terrified. She was sitting in a car that she knew was about to malfunction, next to a stranger, on a sheet of ice. If I had been buckled in, wearing a helmet, gripping the dashboard, what message would that have sent? That I did not trust the outcome, that I expected the worst. She needed to see calm. She needed to see someone who believed she could handle it. You risked your life to make a point? I risked my life because that is what trust looks like. Not words, not policies, not memos. Trust is sitting next to someone in a crisis without a seatbelt and saying, I believe you can do this. Dylan was quiet. That is what your AI cannot do, Ethan said. It cannot trust. It cannot put itself at risk for someone else. It cannot say, I do not know the answer, but I believe you do. It can only calculate, and calculation without trust is just control. Dylan leaned back against the wall. You think about things differently than anyone I have ever met, he said. I think about things the way anyone would if they had lost enough. Is that what it takes? Losing? Ethan set down his coffee and looked at the young engineer with something close to tenderness. I hope not, Dylan. I hope you learn these things some other way. But in my experience, wisdom does not come from winning. It comes from the moments when everything you thought you knew turns out to be wrong, and you have to decide who you are going to be on the other side of that. He stood up. Now go finish the override code. I want to run the full simulation again next Tuesday, and this time, I want the system to do what it should have done for Carl. I want it to let go. Dylan nodded and walked out. Ethan watched him cross the snow toward the engineering building. 29 years old. Brilliant. Stubborn. Scared of being wrong. Reminded him a little of himself at that age, before Iceland, before Sarah, before everything that broke him open and let the light get in. He checked his watch. 2:30. He packed his thermos, zipped his coat, and walked to the truck. At 3:30, the school doors opened. Lily came out running, swim bag bouncing, hair damp, that smile blazing across her face like the only light in the world that mattered. Dad, guess what? What? Coach moved me up to the next lane. The fast lane? The fast lane! He picked her up and held her, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her cold, damp cheek against his. I am so proud of you, kid. Can we celebrate with hot chocolate? We can celebrate with hot chocolate. He set her down, buckled her in, and pulled out of the parking lot. And the man who was quietly rewriting the safety architecture of an entire industry drove away in a rusted pickup truck with a booster seat and a thermos of cold coffee, with his daughter talking 100 miles an hour about her swim coach and her lane change and whether dolphins were faster than sharks. He listened to every word. He always did. The full simulation ran on Tuesday, exactly as Ethan had demanded. Dylan had not slept more than 4 hours a night for the past week. His team had rewritten over 11,000 lines of code. They had rebuilt the override architecture from the ground up, inverting the authority hierarchy so that human input now held default control. They had installed the uncertainty threshold, a protocol that forced the AI to flag conflicting data and request human guidance instead of overriding it. And they had implemented the surrender protocol, the single hardest change, the one that required the system to voluntarily release control when a human driver asserted authority. Ethan arrived at the track at 7 in the morning. Dylan was already there, standing beside the car with dark circles under his eyes and a tablet in his hands. "We are ready," Dylan said. "Are you sure?" "No, but I do not think we will ever be sure. That is the point, right? The system has to work even when we are not sure." Ethan almost smiled. "You were learning." "I had a good teacher." "You had a stubborn one. There is a difference." Chen was the volunteer again. She had insisted. She told Dylan she wanted to feel the difference. She wanted to sit in the same seat, on the same ice, with the same failure conditions, and know whether the changes were real or just theoretical. She buckled in. Ethan sat beside her. This time he wore a seatbelt. Chen noticed. "Seatbelt today," she said. "Today is different." "Why?" "Because today I am not teaching you to trust yourself. Today I am testing whether the machine has learned to trust you." Chen started the car. She accelerated across the ice. 60 kilometers per hour. The AI hummed smoothly, tracking, adjusting, monitoring. Ethan pressed the button. The simulated sensor conflict flooded the system. The same contradictory friction data. The same calibration mismatch. The exact conditions that had locked up Margaret's car and nearly killed her. The car shuddered. Chen gripped the wheel. Her breath caught. And then something happened that had never happened before. A calm tone sounded inside the cabin. A single chime. And on the dashboard screen, 3 words appeared. Uncertainty detected. Driver authority active. The steering loosened. The brakes released. The AI stepped back. Chen felt it immediately. The resistance was gone. The machine was no longer fighting her. It was waiting. It was saying, in the only language it knew, "I do not know what to do. You decide." Chen centered the wheel. She looked past the barrier. She squeezed the brake gently. The car turned. Slowly. Smoothly. The tires found grip. The trajectory shifted. The barrier passed on the right with 5 feet of clearance. The car stopped. Chen sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing. Then she started to cry. Not from fear, not from relief, from recognition. "It let go," she whispered. "It actually let go." Ethan nodded. "That is what it feels like when a system trusts you," he said. "Remember this feeling, because you are going to build it into every car your company makes for the next 50 years. Chen wiped her eyes and looked at him. "Thank you." "Do not thank me. Thank yourself. You got in the car twice. Most people would not have done it once." They climbed out. The engineering team was standing at the edge of the track. 12 people. Silent. They had watched the whole thing on the telemetry monitors. Dylan walked forward. His face was tight with emotion he was trying to contain. "It worked," he said. "It worked." The system identified the uncertainty, flagged it, and transferred authority to the driver in under 200 milliseconds. "Good." "Ethan, this is going to change everything." "No, this is going to change one thing. The one thing that matters." The machine learned to say, "I do not know." Everything else follows from that. Margaret called Ethan that evening. It was 6:15. Lily was doing homework at the kitchen table, and Ethan was making pasta. He answered the phone on speaker because his hands were covered in flour. "I heard the simulation was successful," Margaret said. "It was. Dylan sent me the telemetry data. He was emotional. I have never seen him emotional about anything except code efficiency." Dylan sat in that car. When you sit in a machine that almost kills you,
Efficiency stops being abstract. Margaret paused. I know the feeling. Yes, you do. Ethan, I need to talk to you about something. The board wants a formal presentation. They want to understand the changes, the rationale, the risk profile. They are meeting in 2 weeks in Detroit. Ethan sprinkled flour on the counter. Okay. I want you to present. No. Ethan, I said no. I am not a presenter. I am not a public speaker. I am not going to stand in a boardroom in Detroit and explain to 12 people in suits why their $43 million AI system needed a tire technician to fix it. That is exactly why you need to present. Because if I do it, they will hear a CEO defending a decision. If Dylan does it, they will hear an engineer explaining code. But if you do it, they will hear the man who was standing on the ice, the man who saved my life, the man who put every engineer on this team in the car and made them feel what failure actually feels like. Margaret, I am a contractor. You are the most important person in this company right now, whether you want to be or not. Ethan was quiet. Lily looked up from her homework. Dad, who is that? My boss. I thought you did not have a boss. I do not. She just thinks she is. Margaret heard that and laughed despite herself. Mr. Cross, I am not asking you to be someone you are not. I am asking you to tell the truth. That is what you do. You told me the truth in a tire shed. You told Dylan the truth on a frozen track. Now I need you to tell the truth to 12 board members who are about to vote on whether to invest another $2 billion in a system that almost killed their CEO. Ethan leaned against the counter, flour on his hands, pasta dough waiting. His daughter 10 feet away doing long division. When is the meeting? March 14th, a Thursday. Lily has a swim meet that Saturday. You will be home by Friday night. What time Friday? I will have the jet bring you back by noon. The jet? Yes, the jet. I have a jet, Ethan. It is one of the perks of being the boss you do not have. He wiped his hands on a towel. Fine, I will present. But I do it my way. No slides, no graphs, no data visualizations. I talk, they listen. That is exactly what I was hoping you would say. She hung up. Lily looked at her father. Are you going on a trip? Just one night. Grandma will stay with you. Where are you going? Detroit. What is in Detroit? Some people who need to hear something important. What do they need to hear? Ethan looked at his daughter. 8 years old, curious, fearless, asking questions the way children do, as if the answers might actually matter. They need to hear that being smart is not the same as being wise. Lily thought about that for a moment. Is that like how Megan in my class always gets the answers right on the math test, but she is mean to people at recess? Ethan stared at her. Then he laughed, a real laugh, deep and warm and unguarded. That is exactly what it is like. You should tell them about Megan. That would make it easy to understand. You know what, kid? I might just do that. 2 weeks later, Ethan flew to Detroit. He had never been on a private jet before. The leather seats smelled expensive. The coffee was served in a ceramic cup, not a thermos lid. A flight attendant asked him if he wanted a warm towel, and he did not know what that meant. He wore the same canvas coat he always wore. He had considered buying a suit. Then he decided that if Margaret wanted truth, truth did not come in a suit. Truth came in whatever you were wearing when you learned it. And he had learned every truth he carried in work boots and calloused hands. The Aurora Motors boardroom was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Detroit. 12 board members sat around an oval table made of wood that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. They wore watches that cost more than his annual salary. They held pens that cost more than his daughter's swim lessons for a year. Margaret introduced him. She kept it brief. "This is Ethan Cross. He saved my life 6 weeks ago. He has spent the last month rebuilding our safety architecture. I have asked him to explain why." She sat down. Ethan stood at the head of the table. No podium, no laptop, no slides. Just him. He looked at the 12 faces. Wealth, power, certainty. They reminded him of every boardroom, every committee, every panel that had ever looked at data and decided it was more important than the person standing in front of them. "My name is Ethan Cross," he said. 6 weeks ago, I was a seasonal tire technician at your Northern European proving ground. I checked tire pressure. I cleared snow from wheel wells. Nobody knew my name. Nobody asked my opinion." He paused. "Then your CEO almost died on the test track because your AI system decided it was smarter than the ice." Nobody moved. "I am not going to show you data today. Your engineers have data. Dylan will give you a 200-page report full of numbers and graphs and probability models. And it will all be accurate. And it will all be important. And none of it will tell you the thing you actually need to understand." He leaned forward slightly. "So let me tell you a story instead." He told them about Carl. He told them about Iceland. He told them about the radio that did not work. He told them about standing 300 meters away, watching his best friend's car slide across a frozen lake, screaming instructions into dead air, knowing that the man inside was going to die because a computer had decided it knew better than the ice. He told them about the investigation that went nowhere, the sealed settlement, the reassigned director. He told them about walking away, about Sarah, about the cancer, about the hospital room, about do not be late for pickup. He told them about Lily, about 3:30, about swim practice, about hot chocolate, about the look on a child's face when she knows her father will always be there. And then he told them about the moment on the frozen track when he heard Margaret screaming through the radio, and everything came back. 8 years of silence. 8 years of exile. 8 years of swallowed grief and quiet rage, and the steady, patient discipline of being present for his daughter instead of chasing revenge. "I grabbed the radio," he said, "because I could not grab it for Carl. That is the truth. That is not heroism. That is not expertise. That is a broken man getting a second chance to say the words he could not say 8 years ago." He stopped and looked around the table. "Your company built a system that cannot admit it is wrong. I am standing in front of you because I have spent my whole life learning what it costs when people and machines refuse to let go." He straightened. "Your engineers have rewritten the system. The AI now transfers authority to the human driver when sensor data conflicts with calibration models. It now flags uncertainty instead of overriding it. And it now has the ability to surrender control voluntarily." He held up one finger. "These changes will save lives, but only if you fund them, only if you commit to them, only if you write them into every vehicle your company produces from this day forward. And only if you accept a truth that no one in this room wants to hear." He looked each of them in the eye, one by one. "Your machines will never be wise. They will be fast. They will be accurate. They will process data at speeds no human can match. But they will never know what it means to lose someone. They will never know what it means to stand in a hospital room, holding your wife's hand. They will never know what it means to choose your daughter over your career, your presence over your ambition, your humanity over your efficiency." His voice was steady, not loud, not emotional,
just clear. Wisdom is not a feature you can code. It is the residue of everything you have survived. And the most dangerous thing in the world is a system that has never survived anything, telling a human being that it knows better. He stepped back from the table. That is all I have. You can vote however you want. But if you vote to continue building machines that cannot let go, then everything I just told you was for nothing. And the next person who dies on one of your test tracks will not have someone standing on the ice with a working radio. He turned and walked toward the door. "Mr. Cross!" Ethan stopped. The voice came from the far end of the table. An older man, white hair, thick glasses. Raymond Burke, chairman of the board, 73 years old. He had built Aurora's predecessor company from a garage in Dearborn 40 years ago. "Yes, sir." "How old is your daughter?" 8. "What does she swim?" 50-meter freestyle. "Is she fast?" Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. "Getting faster every week." Raymond Burke nodded slowly. He looked around the table at the other 11 board members. "My granddaughter swims," he said. "She is 10. I have missed every one of her meets for the past 3 years because of meetings like this one." He turned back to Ethan. "I am going to recommend full funding for your protocols, Mr. Cross. Every dollar. No conditions. And I am going to do something else I should have done a long time ago." "What is that?" "I am going to leave this meeting at 3 o'clock because my granddaughter has practice at 3:30, and I have never once been there to watch." Ethan looked at the old man at the end of the table, 73 years old, chairman of a $4 billion company. And in his eyes, Ethan saw something he recognized. Not power, not certainty. Regret. The quiet, corrosive regret of a man who had spent his whole life building something impressive and missing something irreplaceable. "It is not too late," Ethan said. "You think so?" "She is 10. She still looks for you in the stands. Trust me, Mr. Burke. She still looks." Raymond Burke's jaw tightened. He blinked twice. Then he nodded. "All in favor of full funding for the cross-safety protocols, raise your hand." 12 hands went up. Every single one. Ethan walked out of the boardroom and took the elevator to the lobby. He stepped outside into the cold Detroit air and pulled out his phone. One missed call from Lily. He called back. She answered on the first ring. "Dad!" "Hey, kid. When are you coming home?" "Tomorrow morning. I will be there before lunch." "Promise?" "Promise." "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I miss you." Ethan leaned against the glass wall of the building. 42 stories of steel and glass and money and power rising above him. And the only thing that mattered was the voice on the other end of the phone. "I miss you too, kid. More than you know." "Did the people in Detroit listen?" "They listened." "Did you tell them about Megan?" Ethan laughed. "I did not tell them about Megan. But I told them the same thing, just with bigger words." "You should have used Megan. It is easier to understand." "You are absolutely right. Next time, I will bring you with me." "Can I come?" "I would not have it any other way." He hung up and stood there for a moment in the cold. 12 board members. Unanimous vote. Full funding. The cross-safety protocols would be written into every Aurora vehicle from this day forward. Human override. Uncertainty acknowledgement. The ability to surrender. It was the most important moment in the company's history.
And Ethan did not feel triumphant.
He did not feel vindicated. He did not feel like he had won. He felt tired. The kind of tired that comes after carrying something heavy for a very long time and finally setting it down. He thought about Carl. "I finished it, brother," he said quietly. I said the words, and this time they heard me. Then he went back inside, found a quiet corner of the lobby, and called his mother to make sure Lily had eaten dinner and brushed her teeth and gone to bed on time. She had. Of course she had. Because the people Ethan Cross trusted did not let him down. And the systems he built, whether they were made of code or made of love, were designed around one principle that never failed. Show up. Every time. No exceptions. He flew home the next morning. The jet landed at 11. He was at the house by 11:45. He made lunch. He picked Lily up at 3:30. She came running out with that smile. And everything else. Every boardroom, every protocol, every billion-dollar decision fell away like snow in the sun. Because this was the only meeting that mattered. The only vote that counted. The only unanimous decision that would never need a second opinion. A father and his daughter. 3:30. Right on time. 3 months after the board vote, the cross-safety protocols went live in the first production vehicle. Ethan was not at the launch event. He was at Lily's school, sitting on a metal bleacher beside a pool that smelled like chlorine, watching his daughter stretch before the regional qualifying meet. She was nervous. He could tell because she kept adjusting her goggles, pulling them on, pushing them up, pulling them on again. He did not say anything. He just sat there, present, visible. The same spot he always sat in, 3rd row, left side, close enough that she could see him when she turned around. His phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. First production unit rolled off the line at 9 a.m. Uncertainty protocol active. Override hierarchy inverted. Surrender capability confirmed. This is because of you. He read it. He typed back 2 words. Good. Congratulations. Then he put the phone in his pocket and did not touch it again for 2 hours. Lily swam the 50-meter freestyle in 41 seconds, a personal best. She touched the wall and looked up at the bleachers before she looked at the scoreboard. She found him. He raised his fist. She grinned so wide her goggles fogged. After the meet, she came out of the locker room with her hair dripping and her medal around her neck. It was bronze. 3rd place. She held it up like it was Olympic gold. "Dad, did you see?" I saw everything. "I was so scared at the start. My legs felt weird." "But you jumped anyway." "I jumped anyway." He knelt down and held the medal in his palm. It was light. Cheap metal with a ribbon that was already fraying. Worth nothing by any measure the world cared about. Worth everything by the only measure that mattered. "I am proud of you, Lily. Not because of the time, not because of the medal. Because you were scared and you did it anyway. That is the hardest thing in the world." She hugged him, tight, the way only an 8-year-old can hug, with her whole body, no reservation, no self-consciousness, just pure, unfiltered trust. He held her and closed his eyes, and for a moment the rest of the world did not exist. Margaret called that evening. Ethan was washing dishes. Lily was on the couch reading a book about ocean animals, which was her current obsession, because her swim coach had told her that dolphins could hold their breath for 8 minutes, and she wanted to try. "Ethan, we need to discuss something." "Go ahead." "The Wall Street Journal wants to do a feature on the safety protocols. They want to interview you." "No." "Ethan." "I said no. I do not do interviews. I do not do profiles. I am not the story. You are exactly the story. That is why they want you. Then they will be disappointed. Margaret was quiet for a moment. He could hear her thinking. She had learned, over the past 3 months, that pushing Ethan Cross was like pushing a mountain. You could lean on it all day, and nothing would move. What if I told you the article could accelerate industry adoption? Other manufacturers are watching Aurora. If the journal publishes a credible deep dive on why we made these changes and who drove them, it could pressure the entire sector to follow. Ethan turned off the faucet. He dried his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. You are trying to use my sense of responsibility against me. Is it working? A little. Ethan, I am not asking you to be famous. I am asking you to finish what you started. You told me in the tire shed that if anyone at Aurora overrode a safety objection, you would go public. You were willing to use your voice as a weapon. I am asking you to use it as a tool. One interview, one conversation, on your terms. He looked at Lily on the couch. She had fallen asleep with the book open on her chest, a page about blue whales pressed against her shirt. One condition, he said. Name it. They do not use Lily's name. They do not photograph her. They do not mention her school or her swim team. She is not part of this. Done. And I do the interview here, at my kitchen table. They come to me. I will arrange it. And Margaret? Yes? If they ask me about you, I am going to tell the truth. I would expect nothing less. The journalist arrived the following Thursday. Her name was Rachel Dunn. She was 54, a veteran automotive reporter who had covered the industry for 23 years. She had won 2 Pulitzer nominations. She was sharp, experienced, and deeply skeptical of corporate narratives. She sat at Ethan's kitchen table with a recorder and a notebook and a cup of coffee he had made in a $10 drip machine. Mr. Cross, let me start with the obvious question. You were a tire technician. Now the entire automotive industry is talking about protocols that carry your name. How does that happen? By accident, Ethan said. Can you elaborate? I was not looking for this. I was not trying to change anything. I was checking tire pressure because it was a job that let me pick up my daughter at 3:30. That is the whole story. Rachel studied him. She had interviewed CEOs, lobbyists, senators, engineers. She had developed an instinct for people who were performing. Ethan Cross was not performing. He was just sitting at his kitchen table, telling the truth, the way he apparently did about everything. Tell me about the day on the ice, she said. So he told her. The same story he had told the board. Carl, Iceland, the radio, Sarah, the cancer, Lily, 3:30, and the moment when Margaret's voice came through the radio and everything converged. Rachel wrote for a long time after he finished. Then she looked up. You know what strikes me most about your story, Mr. Cross? What? You had every reason to be bitter. You warned them about the ice in Iceland. They ignored you. Your friend died. The company buried it. Your wife got sick. You lost everything. And instead of becoming angry, you became quiet. Most people in your position would have sued, gone to the press, built a career on being the whistleblower. You just disappeared. I did not disappear. I went home. Why? Because my daughter needed a father more than the industry needed a martyr. Rachel set her pen down. Mr. Cross, off the record for a moment. Okay. My father was an engineer, aerospace. He worked on the space shuttle program. He was brilliant, dedicated, gone constantly. I grew up in a house where his work was the most important thing in the world. More important than birthdays, more important than school plays, more important than me." She paused. "He died when I was 30. Heart attack at his desk. And at his funeral, his colleagues said he was the most dedicated man they had ever known." And I stood there thinking, dedicated to what? Because it was not me. It was never me. She picked up her pen again. "I am telling you this because I want you to know that I understand what you did. Walking away from a career to be present for your child is not weakness. It is the single bravest thing a person can do. And most people never figure that out until it is too late." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "It is not too late for most people, Rachel. That is the thing. Everyone thinks the window closes, that the damage is done, that the years they missed are gone forever. And yes, you cannot get those years back. But you can start now. You can start today. The child who needed you at 5 still needs you at 15. The child who needed you at 15 still needs you at 30. It is never too late to show up." Rachel blinked hard. She wrote something in her notebook. He could not see what it was, but her hand trembled slightly as she wrote it. The article ran 3 weeks later. It was not what Ethan had expected. He had expected a technical piece about AI safety protocols and automotive engineering. What Rachel wrote was something else entirely. She wrote about fatherhood. She wrote about a man who had every credential the world valued and gave them up for one that the world did not measure. She wrote about a tire shed and a rusted pickup truck and a booster seat and a thermos of coffee. She wrote about a swim meet where a girl in goggles looked up at the bleachers before she looked at the scoreboard, because the only score that mattered to her was whether her dad was watching. She wrote about Carl Engstrom, who died at 39 on a frozen lake because a machine decided it was smarter than a man. She wrote about Sarah Cross, who spent her last breath saying, "Do not be late for pickup." And she wrote about a CEO who nearly died inside the future she had built and was saved by a voice from the past she had never thought to ask for. The article went viral. Not in the automotive press, not in the tech blogs, not in the engineering journals. It went viral among fathers. It spread through group chats and text threads and social media posts and quiet conversations between men who recognized themselves in Ethan's story. Men who had missed the game. Men who had chosen the meeting. Men who had told themselves that providing for their family was the same as being present for their family, and who knew, deep down, that it was not. Ethan did not read the comments. He did not check the metrics. He did not go on television or accept the 11 interview requests that followed, or respond to the 4 book deals that arrived in his email within 10 days. He went to swim practice. Margaret called him the day the article was published. She was uncharacteristically quiet. "Have you read it?" she asked. "I skimmed it." "She wrote about you like you were the most important man in the world." "I am not the most important man in the world. I am the most important man in one little girl's world. That is enough." "Ethan, the board wants to name the protocol suite after you. The cross override system. It would be standard across every Aurora vehicle for the next decade." "That is fine." "You do not care about having your name on it, do you?" "My name is already on the thing that matters. It is on Liling's emergency contact form at school. It is on her swim registration. It is on every permission slip and every doctor's visit and every field trip. That is where my name belongs." Margaret laughed. Then she stopped laughing. Then she was quiet for a long time. "Ethan?" "Yes?" "I called my brother last night." "Frank?" "You remembered his name. You told me about him in the tire shed. You do not forget the important things." "I called Frank, and I told him I was thinking about stepping down." Ethan paused.
From Aurora? Not entirely. From the pace. From the obsession. From being the person who is always on a plane, always on a call, always building something. I told him I wanted to figure out what it would look like to have a life outside of this company. What did Frank say? He said it was about time. Frank sounds like a smart man. He is. He has been telling me the same thing for 20 years. I just was not ready to hear it. Most people are not ready to hear the truth until they have run out of lies to tell themselves. Margaret was quiet again. I am not like you, Ethan. I do not have a daughter. I do not have a 330. I spent my entire life building a company, and when I look up from my desk, I do not know what I have. You have time, Margaret. That is what you have. Time to figure out what you want to be, now that you have stopped being afraid. Afraid of what? Of being ordinary, of not mattering, of sitting still long enough to feel the things you have been running from. She exhaled slowly. When did you become a therapist? When my wife died, and I had to explain to a 4-year-old that mommy was not coming home. That is when you learn how to talk about feelings, not because you want to, because a child is looking at you, and you are the only person left who can make any of it make sense. Margaret did not respond for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, younger almost. Do you think Sarah would be proud of you? Ethan felt the question land somewhere deep, a place he protected carefully, a place he did not let most people reach. I think Sarah would say I talk too much, and the pasta is overcooked, and Lily needs a haircut, he said. And then she would look at me the way she always did, and I would know. I would just know. Know what? That I kept my promise. 6 months passed. The cross-override system became industry standard faster than anyone predicted. 3 major automakers adopted the protocol within the first quarter. 2 more followed by summer. The European Union cited it in a new regulatory framework for autonomous vehicle safety. The phrase, "authority must be able to surrender," appeared in 17 different engineering textbooks by the end of the year. Dylan was promoted to Chief Technology Officer. He was 30 now, and the first thing he did in his new role was institute a policy that every engineer at Aurora had to spend 1 day per quarter in the driver's seat of a test vehicle under adverse conditions. He called it the Chen Protocol, after the young woman who had volunteered to get in the car. Chen herself had become the lead of a new division focused on human-machine trust engineering, a field that did not exist before Ethan walked into the tire shed. Margaret stepped back from daily operations. She hired a chief operating officer and reduced her schedule to 4 days a week. On Fridays, she drove to Montana to visit Frank on his ranch. She was learning to ride horses. She was bad at it. She did not care. Raymond Burke, the 73-year-old chairman who had raised his hand first in that boardroom, retired at the end of the fiscal year. At his retirement dinner, he gave a short speech. He talked about the company. He talked about the industry. He talked about legacy. And then he said something that made every person in the room go quiet. 3 months ago, I went to my granddaughter's swim meet for the first time. She is 10. I sat in the bleachers and I watched her swim the 100-meter backstroke. She finished 5th. It was not a great time. She did not medal. And when she climbed out of the pool, she looked up at the stands. She had been looking up at empty seats for 3 years. But this time, I was there. And the look on her face when she saw me is the most important thing that has happened to me in 40 years of business. He paused. A man named Ethan Cross taught me that. Not in a boardroom, not in a presentation. He taught me by example, by choosing his daughter over everything the world said mattered. And I will be grateful to him for the rest of my life. Ethan was not at the dinner. He was at home, helping Lily with a science project about ocean currents. They had built a model out of a plastic tub, food coloring, and warm water. Blue dye swirled through the tub like tiny rivers, and Lily was narrating the process like a nature documentary host, using a voice so serious and authoritative that Ethan had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. The warm current moves toward the cold region, Dad. That is called thermohaline circulation. That is a big word. I practiced it 11 times. It shows. She looked at him with those eyes. Sarah's eyes. The same shade of green. The same quiet intensity. The same way of looking at you like she could see everything you were carrying and was not afraid of any of it. Dad? Yeah, kid? Are you happy? The question hit him like a wave, not because it was complicated, because it was simple, because an 8-year-old had asked it the way only an 8-year-old could, without agenda, without judgment, with nothing but genuine curiosity about whether the most important person in her world was okay. He thought about Carl. He thought about Iceland. He thought about the radio that did not work, and the one that did. He thought about Sarah in that hospital bed, her hand in his, her voice steady even at the end. He thought about the tire shed, the frozen track, Margaret screaming through static, the barrier rushing forward. 3 sentences that changed everything. He thought about all the things he had lost, the career, the credentials, the status, the woman he loved, the friend he could not save. The years he had spent invisible, anonymous, dismissed, overlooked. And he thought about all the things he had kept. The promise, the presents, the 3:30 pickup, the hot chocolate, the swim meets, the bedtime stories, the homework at the kitchen table, the science projects with food coloring, the sound of his daughter's laughter echoing through a small house that was worth more to him than every boardroom and every executive suite on earth. Yeah, Lily, he said. I am happy. Really happy, or just saying it? He smiled. Really happy. How do you know? Because I'm right here, with you, and there's no place in the world I would rather be. She smiled that smile, the one that made everything worth it, the one that erased every loss and every scar and every sleepless night, and replaced them with something no algorithm could calculate, no machine could replicate, no system could override. I love you, Dad. I love you too, kid. More than everything. More than everything, everything? More than everything, everything. She went back to her ocean currents, narrating with exaggerated seriousness about water temperature and salinity. Ethan watched her, and in that small kitchen, in that small house, at that small table, a man who had once been a legend, and then a ghost, and then a contractor, and then, for one frozen moment, a hero, sat quietly beside his daughter, and knew with absolute certainty that he had won. Not the way the world measures winning, not with trophies or titles or wealth or fame. He had won the way it actually counts. He was there. He was present. He was known. He was loved. And he had never, not once, missed 3:30. That was the legacy of Ethan Cross, not the protocols that bore his name, not the industry he reshaped, not the CEO he saved or the board he convinced or the engineers he transformed. His legacy was an 8-year-old girl with damp hair and green eyes who never once stood at the school gate wondering where her father was. Because he was always there, every single time. And that, in the end, is the only thing that machines will never learn, that data will never capture, that algorithms will never replicate, and that no amount of money, power, or intelligence can ever replace. The irreducible, unbreakable, sacred act of showing up for the people you love. Not when it is convenient, not when the schedule allows, not when the career permits. Every day, without exception.
Without negotiation, without fail. That is not a protocol. That is not a system. That is not a strategy. That is what it means to be a father. And Ethan Cross was the best one who ever lived.